Welcome to ACC Nation, featuring sports news and special guest interviews. Here's Will Ojanen and Jim Quist.
Welcome to ACC Nation, Will Ojanen and Jim Quist. Thanks for letting us join you. I hope you're having a great October and things are looking interesting here as we get closer to Halloween. And in the U.S., Thanksgiving. For those of you overseas who may not be familiar with Thanksgiving, it's a typical American procedure where we basically stuff ourselves full of stuff and food and drink and just overdo it like we always do everything else. It's fun. And watch a lot of football or basketball or other sports, or whatever's going on. Let's talk about some ACC games. Will, our first one was on Thursday, and that was between the Hokies and the Eagles. Virginia Tech coming away with a 42-21 win. Has that team awakened from their slumber?
Are they the Undertaker? Maybe.
Could be.
I mean, when I did the rankings, I had said that it's possible that they finally gotten their act together. In this game, they were up 28-0 at halftime and outgained BC 332-134. One of the things that still can kind of bite Tech to this game or through this season is they do have some inconsistencies, and that kind of popped up in the third quarter, and BC scored 21 points to make it a close game, but Tech scored 14 in the fourth, blew it open. Bashal Tuden had 266 yards and 3 touchdowns in this game, averaged close to 15 yards a carry. That's it. Like if you want a reason why Virginia Tech is suddenly like a thing again, look no further than him.
Yeah.
He's been just the run game in general. They ran for 368 yards in this game and averaging over 9 yards a carry. So yeah, like this is how the Hokies are going to have to do this. I mean, I think they're probably not going to be a contender to make the ACC championship game, but like you said, they're starting to figure it out. And by the end of the season, if they're 8-4, 9-3, they basically got to where
that would be a successful season.
Yeah. They basically were where most of us thought they could get to anyways. To just kind of went about it a different way.
Yeah, they backdoored it. Speaking of the rankings, which you brought up, that is exclusively found at ACC Nation Streaming Radio. You can go to our website at accnation.net, click on the link to ACC Nation Radio, and it will take you there. Not only do we have Will's latest ACC football rankings, we have Tony Bennett's speech, his press conference, where he has resigned as the head coach of the men's basketball team for UVA. Also, the guys from All Sports Discussion have several of their programs up there as well as ours. So a lot of interesting ACC sports and discussion is available there. You might want to check that out. Friday, Duke and FSU. And, sad to say, but I think, we've just kind of gotten to this point where we expect Florida State to just not deliver what they have been delivering for years. It just has disappeared. And there's all kinds of interesting conversation on message boards about, well, what do we need to do? What needs to be changed? I think people are beginning to come to a grip on the things that probably should change and how they're going to go about changing it. The drama queens have, for the most part, disappeared. There are still some lurking there just to stir up stuff and clickbait nonsense. But I think FSU may find its way back into what we have become accustomed to next year. It's not going to happen this year, that's for sure. Duke 23, Florida State 16. That's a big, big win for Manny.
Might help if I unmute myself, but yeah,
Sure.
you're right. I mean, I'm gonna address that in a second, but first things first, in this instant gratification society, you have to realize that when things don't get well, things don't go well, sometimes change for the sake of change doesn't always fix it. Y'all weren't complaining last year when everything was going so smoothly, and I think we all realized that what they lost talent-wise, it was just going to be impossible to repeat that. And yeah, we all figured they could, but I just didn't think the drop would be as significant as it is currently.
Yeah.
Now, can they get back there? Sure, may take a year, may take two, but again, with the amount of money that the school would owe Mike Norvell, yeah, you're nothing's
You're not
changing there.
going anywhere.
But as far as the game goes,
Yeah.
you mentioned it. Duke is bowl eligible in its first season under Mandy Diaz, which
How
again,
about that?
you're looking at you want to know how successful this season, and it varies from program to program. But if you're Duke, you already, well, I would classify it already as a successful season. You're already bowl eligible 7 games in. You're 6-1. Yeah, I know you ain't. I mean, to use the whole term, they ain't played nobody, but doesn't on the
Played
just
somebody
on.
or they wouldn't have the record, right?
I mean, they're the record of the teams they've played is pretty poor, but I
Sure.
mean it says something about this when you won this game despite 180 yards of offense. I mean, Florida State had 291 yards of offense out, see, had over 100 yards of offense more, sacked the quarterback 6 times, had 11 tackles for loss. But we talk about this quite a bit. What is the one thing you cannot do? Turn the ball over. How many times did Florida State turn the ball over last Friday night? Not one, not two, not three, but four, leading to 17 Duke points. There's your difference right there. Like Duke, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Florida State dominated everything except for that. But you can't turn the ball over 4 times and expect to win the ball game. That's just the reality of the situation.
Now, you speak of bowl eligible teams. Let's run down. Duke, as you mentioned, is bowl eligible now. They have a 2-1 record in the ACC, but they're 6-1 overall, as you point out. Also on that bowl eligible list of teams out of the ACC, Pitt at 6-0, 2-0 in the conference. SMU 6-1 overall, 3-0 in the conference. Miami 7 wins, no losses, 3-0 in the conference. And the conference leader at present was Clemson with a 5-0 ACC record, 6-1 overall. So those are the teams that are essentially leading the Atlantic Coast Conference football race, and we'll see how that all ends up as we get closer to the end, and who the two teams will be, because it's not a lock. Let's be blunt here. We never know what's going to happen at the last moment. So we can make we can presume, and you can go to the route of assumption, and we know what that usually does when you assume that Clemson and Miami are going to be the two teams that are going to be in the ACC championship in Charlotte. I wouldn't put my money on that yet. We'll see what happens. We still have several games to go. The season is, we almost getting pretty close to
We're
3/4
just
now.
past halfway. Yeah.
So we'll see how that all works out. But it's nice to see those teams that are bowl eligible already. And in a little bit, I'll give you some of the projected bowl matchups that Athlon Sports has. Let's get into our next game. Miami over Louisville. This was a battle, and it was a lot of fun to watch from the standpoint of points. And it was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Miami 52, Louisville 45. I know it was disappointing as a loss at home for Louisville, but man, that was a good battle, a good battle, and no defense, but plenty of offense. So,
Yeah, I hope you took the over in this game, folks. I mean,
a lot.
yeah. I mean, what this shows is Louisville on a given week can hang with anybody in the league. Um, it- it's just Cam Ward is just playing on another level right now. Both him and Tyler Slug were over 400 or 300 yards passing and both threw 4 touchdowns. The difference in this game, though, was the run. Miami ran for 219 yards, Louisville 106.
Yeah,
Um,
big.
and we know Miami is a team that when they want to run the ball, they can do it. But when Cam Ward's on the roll, he is. I mean, it makes sense to throw it. And once again, we had a close call that went Miami's way. The what ended up being a fumble return for touchdown was called a forward pass, but the way Cam Ward's arm is hit, and I actually think this time that was the right call.
Yeah.
Unlike the stuff that got missed against Cal and the 50-50 call against Virginia Tech, but they got that one right. But Miami's still, a borderline top 5 team with what they've done so far this season. They're they're scared. I mean, they play Florida State this week, and just based on paper, this should be a blowout. But it's also a rivalry game, so I wouldn't put any shekels on it.
Back to the shekels again.
Let's see if you're paying attention,
I'm paying attention. All right. Listen to the word from the man. Yeah. All right. Our next game, Wake Forest 23, UConn 20. And as you sort of pointed out in the last week's preview and review, that this really isn't much of a game, and it if it were going to end up being close, it would not speak well for Wake Forest. And I think that's exactly what we have here. We have something definitive, Will, that Wake Forest they're just not there this season. And, if they get by with games like this, okay. But
yep, this is one of those you're not worrying about style points. You're just worrying about actually winning.
yeah,
And that's what it was, really. I mean, the difference in this game was once again, just like the last game, the run. Wake outrushed UConn 117-40. And the passing stats are pretty equal, but
right.
and yet they didn't average their average yards per carry wasn't great, but they still had more success than UConn did. Hank Bachmeier threw for 274 yards in this game. Taylor Moore 6 catches, 104 yards. Yeah, guy who's been around the program forever, stepping up and having a big game
Mm-hmm.
for the Deacs. And like I said, it doesn't matter how pretty you won. Fact of the matter is,
You
you
got to
won.
win. That's right.
Mhm.
Next game up, Clemson 48, Virginia 31, a surprise game. In some people's minds, I let me just say this. I still think that Clemson is executing basic football for the most part. They're getting better every week, but they're not blowing my mind with anything. The fact that Virginia put up 31 points and was competitive with them, considering where Virginia has been so far this season, but Virginia is also improving. Let's just make a point of that. Let's not say Virginia is a cellar dweller here, because they're not. They have improved dramatically this season. Clemson has improved dramatically. So this is a nice game. Um, you know, I still think this speaks volumes about both teams. One in a sort of a negative fashion, and that would be Clemson, in a positive fashion, Virginia, because of this final score. Now, let's see what your thoughts are on this final score.
Well, what did I say when about a week ago when I was sitting to your right there?
Yeah,
I thought Virginia had a shot of covering the spread in this game, and lo and behold, they did.
guess what?
I think some of it was due to garbage time, but they still did it. It was a competitive game, in the first, for much of the first half.
First half, yeah.
Clemson went in the halftime up 17-10, but all in all, they ended up scoring 35 straight points. And that just kind of it was kind of shows you the talent gap between the two
Yeah.
schools. And there are games where you're just going to be able to out talent somebody, and Clemson is able to do that a lot of weeks. That was definitely the case here. Kate Klubnik had over 300 yards passing, threw for 3 touchdowns. He looked really good in this game. Like I said, credit to Virginia for fighting and in making this, not a blowout. It wasn't a repeat of the 2019 ACC championship game.
It was a game that was worth watching.
Mhm.
It wasn't one of these cringe games because initially I went into this thing a little bit with cringe mode, and it turned out to be pretty decent. Now, this next game, um, this is, man, I don't know what to say about either one of these teams after this past weekend, but I'm blown away by both of them, but for different reasons. NC State with a 24-23 win over Cal at Berkeley.
Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know what to say about these teams either. It was a good game. Let's not kid around. State scored 14 points in the fourth quarter to win, including a late touchdown pass. CJ Bailey, 306 yards, 2 touchdowns. It's his third game in a row with 2 touchdowns, and he's got back-to-back games of 300 yards passing. And I made this note on Twitter Saturday that he is starting to come into his own and figure things out. We figured, we thought NC State's offense would look considerably different than it actually has. The problem is the offensive line at State is just dreadful. They cannot run the ball. They can't protect. I think Cal's defense had 6 sacks in this game,
Mm-hmm.
and it was, yeah, they just can't keep your quarterbacks upright. State also ran for 29 yards in this game. It was the lowest total since their bowl game at the end of the 2022 season, which was against Maryland. But yeah, that was CJ Bailey is starting to come into his own. And again, no Jade not for Cal. That's very disappointing because I think they would have at least two. They'd probably be at least 500 in the ACC. Maybe you could argue they'd be undefeated if he was there. But Javian Thomas ran for 2 touchdowns. Cal is 0-4 in the ACC, and their losses are by a combined 9 points. So it's almost like one play is really deciding these games.
Yeah,
And
that's
yeah,
painful.
Cal's defense is good enough to keep them in every game. It's just the offense tends to sputter,
Yeah,
especially without a healthy Ott.
I like Mendoza. I think he's a good quarterback. He's a lot of promise, and it's in some of the stuff he does. If he had a better line to deal with, etc., and he had Jade Nott in there, boy, that would be a machine. Be fun. Next game, Notre Dame over Georgia Tech. The final there is 31-13. With Georgia Tech having some of their primary people out, I think it would have been closer, but it's pretty obvious Notre Dame still has that edge. They are that program that, like Clemson, You you lose two or three people, you got two or three people or four or five people stepping right up and saying, "Hey, we're here and we can do the same," and they do.
Yeah, this is a lot. Felt like a lot of the way I feel about this game is similar to the Virginia Clemson game in that this is a situation where Notre Dame just out-talented Georgia Tech, especially with Haynes King out in this game.
Yeah.
And they like Zach Pyron did all right, 269 yards, but two picks, I should say. But your key running back, Jamal Haynes, had 8 carries for 15 yards in this game. And credit to the Notre Dame defense because they are good. And it just, yeah, Georgia Tech, I think, most weeks can compete, but I just think this is what says about something about what Haynes King means to this offense. He is definitely the better quarterback, and he can run the ball as well. He's a pretty good runner. And just I don't know if it would have made a difference in this game necessarily, but I think it would have been a little more competitive had he been in there.
And reminder to Georgia Tech fans, quit being drama queens. Oh God, I get so old listening to people complain about, after you lose one or two games, it's like, oh, we got to get rid of the coach. No, you don't.
It ain't happening.
You got a hell of a coach at Georgia Tech, and man has made a world of difference. Why don't you just let him do his thing and he'll build that program up? I would love to play for a coach like that. That dude has got his stuff together, and I admire him. Next game, two of our newbies, SMU and Stanford. Stanford struggling. They have been struggling for a couple of years. There may be some changes coming down the pike, and I think a lot of people are calling for it. I think probably have been calling for it for quite a while. Stanford can certainly do better than what they have been doing the last couple of years. SMU demonstrating why they are the team to look over your shoulder at because you can hear their footsteps. Final score 40-10 Mustangs.
Yeah, those footsteps that you're talking about are probably being heard by Miami and Clemson because if they stumble, SMU is not too far behind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they did outgain Stanford in this game, 501 to 206. Yards per play was SMU at 7.7, Stanford at 2.9. Just to kind of give you an idea how dominant SMU was in this game. Kevin Jennings, 322 yards, 3 touchdown passes. The defense, 6 sacks, 11 tackles for loss. It was just pure domination. But there was bad news in this game as RJ Maryland, as we record today on Tuesday, it was announced that he will miss the rest of the season. He took a hit to his knee in that game and will again miss the rest of the season. And it's a big blow for the passing game because he was their leading receiver. And I mean, I don't know if he was I mean, he's probably number three in terms of like important people to, you can't afford to lose on the offense, but it's still a big loss. But I think there would be bigger losses if they go down. But the way that SMU spreads the ball around, they're going to find people to step up.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the this past week's games and our thoughts on how people performed or did not perform. Look at the bowl eligible teams. There are 5 of them so far, and Syracuse and Georgia Tech are just one game away from being bowl eligible. Speaking of things like the bowl or bowls, let's look at the real quickly that the 12 team playoff rankings. They will debut on Tuesday, November the 5th, 7 to 8 Eastern time on ESPN, in case you want to watch that instead of politics. Athlon Sports, their bowl projections. Here are some that they have come up with so far. Of course, these are all, again, projections, and they will certainly change between now and the actual fact. they have in the Gasparilla Bowl, NC State taking on Kentucky. In the Holiday Bowl, it's Syracuse and Utah. The Fenway Bowl, Virginia Tech and Army. The Pinstripe Bowl, Michigan and Duke. Pop Tarts Bowl, it's Pitt and Iowa State. The Military Bowl, Boston College and Navy. In the Sun Bowl, they've got SMU taking on USC. Now, that's an interesting matchup. The Gator Bowl, it's Louisville versus Ole Miss. The Duke's Mayo, it's Georgia Tech and Wisconsin. And as you get a little further in here, the college football playoff first round, they have projected Ohio State versus Notre Dame and Tennessee versus Clemson. Quarterfinals in the Peach Bowl, they have Miami versus Ohio State. I'm not going to get into who they think is going to win there one way or the other because, quite frankly, it doesn't matter at this point. It's too early, but it's fun to talk about. Very quickly, let's take a look at the very quickly. The AP and coaches polls, the top five in the AP, it's Oregon, Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State, and Texas. Meanwhile, the coaches have got a little bit better grip on life: Oregon, Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State, and Miami instead of Texas. Then going back over to the AP, they've got Miami at 6, Clemson at 9, Notre Dame at 12, Pitt at 19, SMU at 22, and receiving votes at 27, it's Syracuse. At 29, Duke. Coaches poll, they've got Miami, at, as I mentioned, at 5, Clemson 9, Notre Dame 11, Pitt 20, SMU 22. Receiving votes, same layout, 27 for Syracuse, 29 for Duke. Interesting stuff. So let's take a look at what's going on this week. We've got a lot of games. We're going to do another Thursday, Friday setup. So we'll start out with our Thursday game at Syracuse at Pitt, and this is an important game for both teams. Pitt, if they stumble here, kind of pushes them out of the running for sort of being the top two teams, going to the championship. And I think that they're certainly shooting for that. Syracuse could come up with a win, which would make them bowl eligible. So Syracuse at Pitt. Thoughts?
Well, this game is a lot more interesting now than it was at the beginning of the season. Pitt being undefeated, Syracuse 5-1. Strange enough, that one loss was at home to Stanford on a Friday night. So it's just weird to me that that's Syracuse's lone blemish right now.
Think that.
Right? This game being at Acrisure or Hines or whatever the hell you want to call it. Yeah, I think I like Pitt in this game. I just feel like I just don't know if Syracuse has the defense to stop Pitt, and that's where I think that's going to be the difference in the game. I also think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game.
Friday, it's Louisville at Boston College. This is a be careful, Louisville.
Careful that, yeah, being at Chestnut Hill, you always have to be careful, especially for a road ACC game. But I think, yeah, I like Louisville in this game, definitely. I just feel like what we've seen out of them compared to Boston College, I think is a big difference. I feel like this is where Louisville's going to be able to take out a couple of weeks worth of frustration of close losses, out on Boston College.
Yeah, they need to get a win under their belt and start moving closer toward bowl eligibility as well. The Tech Bowl is coming up on Saturday. That's Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech. The Yellow Jackets will travel to Blacksburg and take on the Hokies. Now, again, this is one of those games where let's not make any presumptions about how it's going to play out, because these two always provide a nice battle. So
yeah, this would be a fun game, especially if Haynes King is back for this game. I don't, as of recording it, has not been announce whether or not he's playing. We'll probably find out later in the week, probably on game day, most likely. Um, if Georgia Tech or if King does play, I think Georgia Tech has a chance, but otherwise, I would still take the Hokies.
Next up is North Carolina and Virginia. It's the Wine and Cheese Bowl.
The South's oldest rivalry, and it's just weird to me to see Virginia be favored in this game after all the recent seasons where Carolina's been a double-digit favorite. And yeah, Virginia won at Chapel Hill last year with a top 10 UNC team. Um, I mean, if Virginia's going to go to a bowl, they got to win this game. Just to be perfectly blunt, I they're going to have to win this game and pull off an upset because I don't think they're going to be favored in another game the rest of the year.
Going to be a tough play out. Um, North Carolina at Scott Stadium. I would definitely give the benefit of the doubt to Virginia, especially after the performance against Clemson. Um, I think this is a game that could go either way. Um, who knows? I mean, we've just reached that point in the season now to where it's like some of these games that we would have thought would have gone a certain way. Now you don't know, or know they're going to go the opposite way. So, Wake Forest at Stanford is next. This could be a toss up. It should be a toss up.
I mean, it's also your sicko game of the week.
I'm
I
sorry.
mean, it is. I mean, Wake, I have it here as a 3-point favorite in this game. Um, I, I I don't know how comfortable I would be taking them in this game. I feel like they're a slightly better team, but it's still I just don't trust Wake like fully in a road game. That's kind of where I have some hesitancy, but I obviously don't trust Stanford either because I just don't think they have what they need to really win a lot right now. So I
So
guess if you're gonna make me choose one, I'll probably take Wake.
you just pointed out something a moment ago that Syracuse lost at Syracuse to Stanford.
Hmm.
What if that team shows up?
If that team shows up, that yeah, they're winning probably by 10, maybe a little more.
So we'll we'll see. Oregon State is at Cal. Hmm.
Former Pac-12 game, now a non-conference game because of all the money. Um, yeah, I like Cal in this game. Oregon State's, they're a decent team this game, actually at Cal, but I do even whether or not Jaden Ott plays, I still think I like Cal in this game. I think their defense is going to be able to do
Yeah.
a lot to this Oregon State team, and I think, and yeah, they're 4-3, but I feel like they don't have their schedule obviously because of the limbo they're in isn't great, but it is. But I still like the Golden Bears in this one.
You alluded to this matchup. It's a rivalry game, a big game in Florida. FSU at Miami.
Yeah, this game at Hard Rock, and kind of curious to see what the attendance is like for this game. It's going to be, we don't see a full Hard Rock stadium very often. I think this is going to be one of those instances where you'll see that. It just boggles my mind that Miami is a 21-point favorite in this game, but at the same time, what have we seen out of Florida State to make you think they could be within 3 touchdowns of the Hurricanes right now? So yeah, give me Miami.
And final game, SMU at Duke. I would give the plus to SMU.
Hmm. I would too, but again, Duke's defense is going to be a factor in this game. They are a pretty good defense, and that has not changed since with new coach because you're going from one defensive coach to another. But yeah, SMU I think is going to be able to have some good success on the ground and I think they'll win this game. Would I want to take them in the point spread at 11.5? Probably not. I'd probably shy away from that, honestly.
So, an interesting week of games coming up. And as we mentioned, we're getting closer and closer to the end of the season. The basketball season is just a few weeks away. Um, that's going to be an interesting. Uh, it's just with Tony Bennett dropping that bomb when he did, it just sort of makes me rethink a lot of things. It makes me want to look closer at every single team in the ACC and see what's going on there and see if I can sniff out anything different. And
Hmm.
I mean, there's some things there. I'm just totally rethinking every single team
Hmm.
because of that.
So I have not had an opportunity to talk about it very much since the news came down. For those of you who have not paid attention lately, the last couple of weeks I've been on a what has amounted to a 12-day, 3,000-mile road trip, traveling, to see some history, just knocking off some bucket list stuff, going to see some friends, seeing that guy on the other screen there and his wife for a couple of days. So I found out the news about 2 hours from home. I'm somewhere in the middle of Wisconsin, somewhere like outside of a couple hours out, like, I mean, an hour outside of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I'm literally driving down the road. I felt like a vibration on my watch for a notification, and I look and see something that says Tony Bennett. So I go to my wife. And I'm like, hey, can you check my phone? I saw something about Tony Bennett. And she grabs it, looks in it. She says, Tony Bennett's retiring. I damn near drove my car off the road. Like the shock of it, like just a couple of weeks before the season, like it to some extent, all these days later, still hard to process the situation, but I understand it now. Like, especially with things that have come out since. Like, he's very much an old school coach. And it's, these guys who have been in the profession for 20, 30 plus years who are used to doing it the same way. And now with the transfer portal and NIL, you're having to do things in a totally different way, and they're just not cut out for one reason or another. Tony Bennett admitted to it as much in his press conference on Friday. Um, it's it's a sign. It's a sad story. It's a sad state of affairs when all these amazing coaches are just dropping because of it. And I think Tony Bennett's the youngest one of them all. Honestly, I think at 55, but he's, eventually this is what he chose. And I have said at, points throughout, especially last season when things kind of were going downhill, when they suddenly could not score to save their lives, that enjoy it while you can, because Virginia will likely never have a coach win 70% of their games ever again. And I did not expect that to be this upcoming season. I honestly thought he might have 2 more years in him. Like with the way that contract was, this contract extension, I thought he was going to get 2 more years. I thought, or he was going to do 2 more years and retire.
Yeah.
And just having that thrown on me, it was just a huge shock. Now, I mean, I'll be honest. I've said this a couple of times on Twitter I've even said on this podcast that I thought Virginia, regardless, they had the biggest variance of any team in the ACC because there's so much unknown to this team because they lost their two of the best defenders they've had in quite some time, and Ryan Dunn and Reese Beekman. And then the question is, how are they going to score? And well, that's one of those things we're not going to know until they actually got out on the court. So I thought they could finish as high as third, they could finish as low as 10th. And even with Ron Sanchez coaching, I still feel the same way. Like they if they can shoot the ball well, play good defense, I think they can still finish third. But if the bottom falls out, they could finish 10th, maybe worse. I yeah, I very much applaud Tony for everything he's done. I will still say that the 2019 NCAA tournament, especially the championship game, was the greatest sports event I ever attended. And for those of you who are familiar with the sports futility in Minnesota, 33 seasons, 33 years without a championship, at least on the men's side, we don't have much in this town. So, I mean, the day one, the Twins win the World Series, or the Vikings win the Super Bowl, or the Wild win the Stanley Cup, or the Timberwolves win the NBA championship. That's going to be an amazing thing. Like, I'm going to enjoy the hell out of it. But it won't compare to Virginia winning a national title in Minneapolis and having everybody come to me, basically. Um, it's yeah, it I just want to say thank you to Tony Bennett for the past 15 years and giving Virginia basketball and its fans something to cheer about. And I wish you well in retirement.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Yeah, it's this whole scenario. If rather than reacting as a lot of people have inappropriately, if people were to look at it from the same perspective, I think that you just looked at it from, and just and realize why the decision was made. You you may not like it, but you come to peace with it. And he's not only is he a good coach, but he's a really nice guy. Genuinely a nice guy. I've encountered him once or twice on grounds, and just pleasant. Just, I mean, wasn't standoffish, just pleasant. And rarely do you get people at that level in any sport that are like that. Some quick things to run down here before we say sayonara in one language or another. United Soccer Coaches men's poll. It's Ohio State, Maryland, Clemson, Marshall, and Pitt top 5. Stanford at 7, Duke at 10, UNC at 11, NC State 19, SMU at 21, and UVA comes in receiving votes at 26. On the women's side, it's Duke at number 1, Wake Forest, Mississippi State, UNC, and Arkansas rounds out the top 5. Notre Dame is at 7, Stanford 12, FSU is at 17, Virginia Tech 19, and UVA 24. Now, field hockey. You got to touch base on everything here, man. Northwestern is the number 1 team. UNC is at 2. 3, it's Ohio State, UVA 4, St. Joseph's at 5. Way to go, St. Joseph's. I'll give you a lot, kudos there. Boston College is at 9, Duke at 10, and Syracuse at 12. Volleyball. Oh, God. Pitt still hanging in there at number 1, doing a great job. Nebraska at 2, Penn State at 3, Louisville at 4, Stanford at 5, 3 out of the 5 ACC teams. Hey, SMU at number 12, Georgia Tech 17, FSU at 19, UNC at 25, and in the receiving votes category, it's Miami and Virginia at 35 and 36. Cross-country championships are coming up close, the beginning of November, and in cross-country, Here are the top teams out of the ACC. On the men's side, at number 5, it's Stanford. Number 7, Wake Forest. Number 10, Notre Dame. 12, Syracuse. 13, UNC. UVA at 16, and receiving votes at 35 is Florida State. Meanwhile, on the women's side, at number 5, Notre Dame. 10, NC State. 13, Florida State. 15, Stanford. 19, UNC. 21, UVA. 23, Syracuse. 30, Boston College. Yeah, we're going to hit everything. The Spike Mark Scoreboard NCAA golf team rankings. Yeah, I haven't heard that one before, have you?
Must be a new sponsor or something.
It's a new system.
Okay.
Yeah, slightly different. So since we're tied in with that now, that's where I'm going for all of the team rankings and individual rankings, which we'll have more as we of course, it's still early, but nonetheless, on the men's side, UVA is at number 7, UNC at 8, Georgia Tech 9, SMU 20, Notre Dame 21, 24, Stanford 26, FSU. Women, it's Stanford at number 3, FSU at number 9, UNC at 10, Virginia 12, Wake Forest 17, Duke 20, and Cal at 22. Swimming. Getting along swimmingly here. Men's side, it's Cal at number 1, NC State at 5, Stanford at 9, Virginia Tech at 10, Louisville 11, Virginia 15, Georgia Tech 17, Florida State 22, and SMU at 24. Man, they're just loading it up out of the conference here. Women's side, Virginia takes number 1 again. Stanford is at number 4, Louisville at number 7, Cal at 8, NC State 12, Duke 16, UNC 21, and Miami at 24. And guess what? That's the last page of goodies that I have. So we've taken a nice thorough look at ACC football and everything that's going on there. And some thoughts from Will on Tony Bennett, which I thoroughly appreciated. And thank you for doing that and those kind words you had for Coach. And some look at what's going on in some of the fall sports and how teams are ranked. ACC's doing really well, as always. And the 3 new teams which are added are making a huge contribution along the line there. And success. Hey, it's a good thing. Can't go wrong. Oh, boy. Looking forward to that very first 12-team playoff ranking. See where that all – because, man, it seems like things have really been churning a lot on the polls. So I'm looking forward to that. That is going to be on November 5th. So we'll see where that all plays out. Well, sir, until next time, cheers.
School.
Thanks for listening to ACC Nation. Be sure to listen, like and subscribe to our podcast, radio, and YouTube channels by visiting accnation.net. Follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook, Mastodon, Threads, Blue Sky and Reddit at ACC Nation.
ACC Nation.